Hi everyone, welcome to channel Qtomation. In previous session, we have seen about authentication in REST assured. We have seen what is authentication. Authentication is the process of verifying the identity of the user or client who is trying to access the API. There are multiple ways by which authentication happens in REST assured or in API testing. We have seen basic authentication by using username and password. Today we will see bearer token and custom authentication by using API keys. So far we have seen basic authentication, digest authentication, preemptive basic authentication in our previous session. So if you have not watched that session, I will request you that please watch that session first. In today's session, we will see about one more type, that is bearer token, and by using custom authentication like API keys. So first, let's see about custom authentication, that is by using API keys. So sometimes whenever we get some API contract or API documentation for any project, you cannot access those API directly. So client or the project which is provided, they will also provide some API key to access those API. For example, there is one website app.request.in which has some dummy APIs. If you see, there is a API to create a new user. So I have just copied this API in Postman. So this is a API. So let's see that API first. So this is that API which is used to create the user. But if you see, this specific API requires some API keys to access those API. They have provided that free API key here. So without that API key, you cannot access those API directly. For example, if you see the same API which I am accessing, inside this header, I have to pass that API key. If I don't pass this API key and if I try to access this API, it will show you that missing API key. So it is throwing some error 401 unauthorized because API key is missing. So that's why whenever we want to access this API, we have to use API key. So that API key is provided by the person who has created that project, or even developers can provide that API key. So on their website, they have provided this API key which we have to use to access this API. So if you see in the headers, we have to pass x-API-key and its value. So I'm just passing that value in headers. So in headers, we have to add this API key. And if I access this API now, so this is API to create a new user in which we are passing this payload, where we are passing name as John Doe and job as developer. So if I access this time it will give you success response 201 created, and that API successfully created this user. So this is how we can use API key in Postman. Now we will see the same thing how we can use in REST assured. So for that, let's go to Eclipse. I'm just creating a new file, new class file. I'm naming it as auth demo new. Let's create this file. So we have created this class file. Now in this, let's create At first, we have to import static packages. So from our last session, I am just copying these packages and let's paste those in our current file. Now we have to create one test method. So I am creating one test method. I am naming it as test API key demo. So this is a method which we have created. Now in this method, we have to pass the body. So if you see, we have to pass this payload. This is a post request. So it has some payload as well. So for that, we have to create request payload. So we can create request payload by using multiple ways. So we will just use hash map this time. So I will just create one hash map object. Data equal to new hash map. Let's import hash map from java.util package. Now we have created this object data. Inside this data, we have to create that payload. So data dot put, first value which we have to pass is name, John Doe. Then you have to pass data dot put job, let's say as a tester. So this is we have the data object which we have created, which basically contains the request payload. Now we have our regular syntax, that is given, when, dot, then section. So now we have to use first given section. We can pass content type application slash JSON, and now we have to pass the API key. So when we have to pass the API key in Postman, where we have passed it, so we have to pass it in headers. So in headers, we have to pass this API key. So inside the header section, we have to pass key and value x hyphen API hyphen key and its value. So that value is provided by the person who has created that project. So this is a API key value. So in different projects, you will get different values, but that value we have to pass in the header. And after that, we can pass the body, the request payload which we want to send, that is present in this data object. So I am just passing this data object here. So in given section, we have done. Now we have to pass when section. So what is the request type? It's a post request. And what is the URL we are hitting? So this is a URL which is used to create the user. So I'm just pasting that URL here in post type of request, and in then section we can validate the response. So first we can put validation for status code. What should be the status code here? 201. So 201 is the status code which is expected status code. If you want, we can print the entire response as well. So dot log dot all. After that, if you want to add some validation around the body, so let's say around the body I want to add validations. So name should be, what is the name which is coming in the response, that is John Doe. So name should be expected as John Doe, and we can also validate for job as well. Job should be tester. So whatever we are passing in the request payload, that user will be created by following data. So we have to use equal to. So here we have to use equal to. That's it. So this is our simple API request which uses API key in the header, because these APIs we cannot directly access without the API key. So API key is one type of authentication which is added for the APIs. So now if I execute this request, it will pass this API key in the header with this value, so that this API will be valid at the server side. So server will allow to send the response to this request. And then we are validating status code should be 201. In body, name should be John Doe and job should be tester. So this is a simple example. So let's execute this file. So when we run as, so first we have to add testng annotation at the rate test. Let's say priority equal to 1. Let's save this file and let's execute this file now. So when we execute this file, it should give the success response, and we should be able to see the response in header as well. So test case is passed. That means our API successfully validated. This is a response log which is printed in the console, and we have successfully checked API key validation. So that is one example which we have seen. So what we have seen is, we have seen basic authentication, digest authentication, preemptive basic authentication, and custom authentication. This time we have used for custom authentication, we have used API keys. So API keys we have to pass in the header. Now we will see one more example of bearer token. So bearer token is also one of the type of authentication which is used in APIs. So for the bearer token, I will use one more API. This is another API, http bin.org/bearer. Now this API, whenever you are going to hit this API, it will require authorization type as bearer token. So sometimes whenever we get some APIs, they will also provide the bearer token. Without the bearer token, you will not be able to get success response for those API. So let's say I'm just putting no auth here. And if I try to hit this request, let's see the response. In the response, you can see 401 unauthorized. It is not allowing to hit the API. So to hit the API, if you go to their website, let me just go to their website as well. So if you go to their website, inside their website, if you see in auth method section, they have this specific get request which requires bearer token as a authentication method. If you don't provide the bearer token, it will give you unsuccessful authentication 401 error. But if you provide some bearer token, now in normal project, you will get some random string as a form of bearer token. But in their dummy website, you can put any authentication type as bearer token, and here we have to enter that specific bearer token. So for this test example, we can put any value as a bearer token. Let's say I'm just putting this specific string as a bearer token. So now if you hit this request, it will give you success response. It will give you 200 OK with authenticated as true, and this is a token which we have used. Now this is a simple example website which they have provided. Now the same thing we will do via rest assured. Now let's see how we can perform this via rest assured. So let's go to our Eclipse. In the same file, I will create another test method. Let's create one more test method, void test bearer token demo. This is a simple method which we have created. We have to provide at the rate test annotation, at the rate test annotation. Let's give priority equal to 2, and inside this we have to use given, when and then section. Given, when and dot then section. So whenever we have to pass the bearer token as a authentication. So if you see in Postman also, we have to use authorization type as bearer token, and that will be eventually passed in the headers section. In headers, if you see, key is authorization, and if you see this value, bearer token is passed as, first we have to use keyword as bearer and then the value of that token. So first keyword is bearer and value of that entire token. Inside the key, what is the key name? Authorization. So same thing we have to do in the given section. Inside this given section, we have to use dot header. We have to pass authorization as a key. Key name is authorization and its value. So what is the value? First we have to use bearer keyword. Along with the bearer keyword, this is a bearer keyword which we have to pass, and then we have to pass the token value. So this API is currently taking any value as token value. So what we can do, we can simply use bearer keyword space and let's say token value. So I'm just putting test token value. That's it. So you will get this token whenever you get API documents. They will provide you what type of bearer token which we have to use in those API. So that we have to pass in the header section. So in given section dot header, authorization is a key name and value of that token along with the bearer keyword. And then we can use dot when section. What is the request type? It is a get request type. What is the URL which we have to use? This is a URL which we have to use. So I'm just copying this URL and let's put it in get section. So it will hit the request with the bearer token which we have provided in the header. After that, we will get the response. What is the status code we have to validate? Status code should be 200. Along with the status code, if you see, this is a 200 status code, and body will contain authenticated value as true and the token value. So we can simply verify for this authenticated value. Let's say I want to put validation around the body as well. So dot body authenticated. What is the value? Authenticated value should be equal to true. So I'm just putting equal to true. That's it. If you want to print the console response, that also you can do dot log dot all. So it will validate this specific request. So whenever we execute this test case, it will hit this endpoint with the get request type, and in the header it will pass that bearer token. And once it will get the response, status code should be 200. Inside the body, authenticated should be true, and it will print the response in the console. So that is how we can pass bearer token in request whenever we are using rest assured. So now let's execute this file and let's see the output. So once you execute this test file, both the test cases should pass. Something is failed, so sometime the request gets failed. So expected is true. Okay, authenticated doesn't match. So let me just quickly check the spelling. Authenticated. Okay, so let's copy this. Let's go to our test code. Let's put it here. Let's save this file and let's execute this file as test.ng test. So both the test cases should pass this time. Okay, expected true. Actual value is again true. So let me see what is the missing here this time. Okay, so here we don't have to provide the codes here. Let's save this and let's execute this file. This time it should execute properly. It should give success for both the responses. Both the test cases got passed this time. And if you see, this is the response which we have received. So this is an example of using bearer token. So whenever we are using API key, so first we have seen the example of by using API key authentication. So API key we have passed in our header section. And when we used bearer token, that is again we have to pass that in header section with the key as authorization and with the bearer keyword and value of that specific token. So this token value, bearer token value, we will get in API contract or API document. Whenever developer or any product person will give you the project, they will also provide the value of this bearer token. So that value you have to pass like this. So I hope you have understood this session. You have understood how to use basic authentication, digest authentication. We have also seen preemptive basic authentication. And in today's session, we have seen about bearer token authentication. And then we have also seen custom authentication by using API keys. Now, in the next session, we will see about OAuth 1.0 and OAuth 2.0. So, OAuth, that is also one of the type of authentication which is used in API testing. So, that we will see in our next session. So, thank you for watching this session. Let's meet in our next session.